Shrenis or guilds were amongst the earliest forms of organized business in India, an economic coming together of traders or skilled professionals, often family or community based. Until the East India Company brought to India the concept of a modern corporation, a chartered company issuing stock, paying dividends and multinational in presence. Devdutt Patnaik, welcome to the first episode on this series. I'm going to start by quoting from a well-known management thinker whose seminal work was The Fifth Discipline. He talks about learning organizations and organizational development, and in reference to India and China, he said, my intuition is they will move somewhat together, but in very distinctive ways. But I think the thing that will be really common to both of them will be the fact that they won't be able to do this without reconnecting to their heritage. They will have to develop a confidence that they can do this as Indians and they can do this as Chinese. They have learned a lot from the West, but they don't have to copy. They cannot create a Chinese or Indian version of a Western model. The Western model itself is basically bankrupt. It does not give enough attention to the human side of development. If the concept of corporations was borrowed from the West, is there an Indian way of doing business?
Yes, there is. To understand this, we have to understand the Indian context. And to understand what is the Indian context, we have to hear a story. And the story is of a long time ago when Alexander came to India. And he was the first European, one can say, who came to India. And he came to the banks of the Indus. And he met there a very strange man called a gymnosophist. He called it a gymnosophist because this man was naked and he seemed to be wise and everybody respected him. So Alexander asked the gymnosophist, because he was doing nothing, he was sitting over there staring at the stars. He says, what are you doing? And the gymnosophist said, I'm experiencing nothingness. And then the gymnosophist asked Alexander, what are you doing? Alexander said, I'm conquering the world. And they both laughed. Each one thought the other was a fool. Alexander felt that it's a waste of a life to do nothing. And the gymnosophist thought it's a waste of a life to do anything. Where from came these differences? If you understand these differences, we'll understand the difference between the Indian mindset and the Western mindset.
Okay.
You see, Alexander was told all his life that when you die, there is a river that you have to cross. It was called the Styx. And when you go to the other side, you'll be asked a question, have you done anything extraordinary in your life? And if you've done something extraordinary or spectacular, you will go to the place that the French call Champs-Élysées or Elysium, which is reserved for heroes. Otherwise, you have to go to the asphodel fields, which is meant for commoners. And so Alexander was told always to do something spectacular. And he was told stories of heroes like Hercules and Theseus and the epics like Iliad and Odyssey. This is what he was told. But this is not the story that the gymnosophist heard. You see, the gymnosophist heard a different story. He was also told of a river which separates the land of the living from the land of the dead. But you see, don't you make the journey once. You make the journey to and fro endlessly.
That's what the gymnosophist was told.
Which means you're living again and again and again and again. It's not one time. You have many chances. So now this changes perspective. Imagine one person who's told you live only once. His life is full of sense of urgency. He wants to do everything in this one life because that's the only life he has got. The denominator of Alexander's life was one. Now look at the gymnosophist. He can live many, many times. Not only does he live many, many times, he can live the same life again and again because it's cyclical. What goes around comes around. So the denominator of the gymnosophist's life is infinity. So the value of his life, no matter what he did, was zero. The value of Alexander's life was the sum total of his achievements. So the focus of Greek narratives has been achievement. The gymnosophist, the focus is, so if nothing is of value, then what's the point of his life? Introspect. Figure it out. Figure it out. So you do many things. You have to do many things in life, but the point is not the doing. The point is figuring out why are you doing what you are doing. So the two paradigms are different. Therefore, the Indian way of doing business was not about doing business, but using the act of doing business to figure out why are you doing what you're doing. Question it. And in that there is growth, intellectual growth and emotional growth.
I understand this is our conditioning, and that's why, and in the context of this, you're explaining what the Indian way of doing business could potentially be.
Yes.
My only issue with this is that this is so much more achievement focused. It comes with a sense of urgency, both qualities that are imperative in the world of business.
Yes.
You've got to achieve, you've got to do it fast. Is the Indian way of doing things, living life, the infinity, best suited to the notion or the concept of profitable businesses as we know them today?
You see, when we use the word profitable business, who says it's a good thing? Humans say it is a good thing.
No, profits are a good thing because they allow you to think of ideas, make something constructive of them, earn of them, not just for yourself, but to be able to share the wealth, run an organization efficiently. So profit is not a bad thing.
How much profit? Give me the perfect number. That's where the problem is, isn't it? It's not about profit. Everybody understands profit. But how much profit? How do we know it is not motivated by greed? And is greed okay? If you're saying greed is okay, then of course it's a moot point, then we don't discuss it. Then the question comes, no, greed is not okay, but what is need in greed? Now that's a conversation. Let's figure out the conversation. And that's where introspection comes in. Why do I want to grow is an important question. We can delude ourselves with politically correct answers that we're doing to generate wealth, but what's the actual reason? What's the real belief? Maybe it's self-aggrandizement. I don't want to be a head of a 100 crore store. I want to be a 100 crore company. I want to be a leader of a 10,000 crore company. Then I feel good about myself. So then the purpose of business is not to generate wealth for the community. It is to feel good about myself. And that's a problem.
If in India the belief is also wealth and not only wealth, the core question that most of us are faced with in our daily existence as our corporations, what is the purpose of a corporation? What is the motivation that should ideally drive a corporation? Should it not be profitability? Because profitability is also equal to a certain efficient way of running, a certain distribution of wealth. And profits can only come if you produce goods and products that consumers want in the best, most efficient fashion.
Absolutely.
So profitability, is it wealth? Is it generosity? Is it ambition? Is it greed? What should the purpose and motivation of a corporation be?
I think the motivation of a corporation is to create happiness. In India, currency is of three types, and it was represented using the three goddesses. So you have one goddess called Lakshmi, so you have this goddess who is sort of famous for sitting on a lotus. Everywhere in India you have this image. She sits on a lotus, she holds a pot which is overflowing with wealth, and you have another goddess. And this goddess is famous because she holds a lute in her hand, and she is Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge. And there's a third goddess, and if you go to Bombay's Mumbai Devi temple, or if you go to the Mahalakshmi temple, for example, you will see these three goddesses, and one holds a trident, and she's called Durga. So you have, forgive me, but now this has unfortunately become a very infamous term, it's LSD. One is material, tangible wealth. The other is intellectual wealth. And the third one is emotional wealth. And these are the three things that two human beings transact with each other.
Why does Durga represent emotional wealth?
You see, Durga is, the more popular name of Durga is also called Shakti, which is power. Now, if I walk into a party and look at you and say, Ma, you have gained a lot of weight since the last time I met.
Thank you.
You'll feel depressed. So you feel suddenly disempowered. But a sentence. Or I come in and say, you know what, you're looking wonderful and radiant, and the clothes you're wearing are lovely, and you look really nice. And suddenly you feel empowered. So what has happened is an emotional transaction has taken place, and we don't even realize it's actually a currency that can be used very, very well between two people. And we yearn and crave for this emotional currency. Everybody wants it. Even the gods want it. So you have a material need, you have an intellectual need, and you have an emotional need. And organizations have to work at all three levels. The question is somewhere along the line, the balance scorecard, if you look at it carefully, is about LSD.
Okay, one of the conflicts continuously in the creation and sustenance of corporations really is the ability to balance short-term with long-term, right?
Yes.
Now, professionally speaking, there are lots of glib quotes that can help you understand this situation, right? Jack Welch, who's one of the most famous management thinkers in the world, and therefore and also venerated for the success that he brought to General Electric, said anybody can manage short, anybody can manage long. Balancing those two things is what management is all about.
Okay.
What does our mythology say about whether you need to be short-term, whether you need to be long-term? And if you're going to choose the middle path and tell me, Menka, you need to be bits of both, please tell me how we achieve that.
You see, when you look at mythology, there is Vishnu, the god who sustains the world, is associated with two animals. One is called a serpent, a sarpa, or shesh, and other is a eagle, Garuda. There's something called Garuda Drishti, which is long sight, and there is Sarpa Drishti, which is immediate goals. The question is, what should I focus on first?
Right.
When you look at how the story of creation happens in India, the moment they talk about creation, they also talk about its destruction. They talk immediately about destruction, which means you don't just talk about the building of the organization. At the day it is begun, you discuss how it's going to die. It's not assumed to be immortal, because mortality is a universal truth, and you are aware of it. So you're discussing mortality. And then you say that, okay, if I'm going to be born and I'm going to die, how do I live a healthy and happy life? And how long can I sustain it? If that applies to health, the same thing applies to organizations. Unfortunately, the way we are structured, we break it down into bits. You see, we break it down into bits. And when a CEO takes over, for example, he's told your lifespan is 2 years or 3 years, and you have to win every year. You're not allowed to lose. So effectively, he's under pressure on the Sarpa Drishti. The shareholder says, I want winning every year, growth. Every year you have to grow, year on year, grow, be profitable. And that's where and I'm told that that's the measurement, and I'm told that's the reward. And if I'm going to last for 3 years, so I'll just make sure that I win 3 years. I'm not thinking about 30 years and 300 years. So perforce the system is saying Sarpa Drishti.
How do you correct that? Because you're always going to have someone in charge for a limited period of time. Yes. They're going to try and excel within that limited period of time, and therefore for them short-termism will always be the first goal to achieve, as opposed to long-termism. I understand that the ideal should be long-termism, but not all of us can actually put that bill in that sense.
See, in the health case, you see, you can't escape the consequences.
You can't, and it's personal.
Yes. In an organization, you say, I can escape the consequences.
Because I want to be around. I will not be CEO, maybe.
You see, look at this is slightly more technical and beyond my space, but if I'm a shareholder of the company, what I need from the company is wealth. I don't care if the company, if it does something horrible, I won't be held responsible for it, right? That's what's limited. When it's called a limited company, the shareholder is not responsible for the horrible things the company does.
Right.
So
but he will have to bear the downside risk.
He just loses money.
Yes, but he's not complete. Yeah, well, that's an important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but if the faraway country is polluted by it,
he doesn't have to bear the ill.
So this company will shut down. I lose some money, but I still maintain my lifestyle. So I'm not responsible for my consequences. So I just focus on that one side. I'm saying I'm not responsible for consequences. So give me my money back. I behave like a money lender. And I say, give me my money back. I don't behave like a shareholder. I behave like a money lender. So I've given you 10 rupees, you give me 20 rupees next month. And if you don't give it, I'll throw you out of the CEO position. So I own my vision is short term. I'm not responsible for the long term sustenance. So in a way, I have built into the system freedom from consequences.
Interestingly, you made the case for family-owned businesses, right? For almost 10 years now in this country, we've looked at the phrase family-owned business with some amount of contempt. It's again a Western concept that we have all inherited over the past 20, 30, 40 years, that ideally an organization must have separation between ownership and management. It should be professionally run, and it should be run for the benefit of all stakeholders, as opposed to the benefit of the entrepreneur that may have started that organization. But there the problem is that if you're going to have leaders that come in for limited periods of time, they're going to be concerned with their immediate term.
Yes.
So short-termism.
Yes.
But if you have organizations owned by families that will patronize these organizations, help them sustain, help them grow over generations,
Yes.
that is long-termism.
Yes.
You're making the case then for family-owned businesses, a phrase that we've looked down upon in some ways for the last 10 to 15 years.
Look at the word professional. We are using it again without context. We're saying anywhere, anytime, if it's professional, it's good. Let's now decode professional. What does it mean, be professional? It means cut out emotions. Be logical.
Cut out the D.
So D does not matter.
Yes.
So out of the three goddesses, which for 3,000 years has been celebrated in India, we're saying one goddess is out.
Right.
Power. And please note, that is the one thing that we crave for as human beings. We want to feel powerful. And if I look at it physiologically, you're saying focus on the left brain. The right brain is bad. Right brain is not good. Focus on the left brain. And that's, we're saying that is good for the organization. The problem with the family-owned business is that it focuses too much on the right brain. So my son is better. My son may not be better. You see, India is called Bharat, and we forget a story of the name, this character called Bharat. There are many Bharats, of course, in mythology, but one very obscure story which is amazing, and I found it very interesting. It's about the son of Shakuntala, and he had many wives and many sons, but he rejected all the sons. And we don't know why. He said, he doesn't look like me. That's the literal translation. But perhaps, and then what he does is he adopts, or he's given by the gods, a son who's actually an illegitimate child, rejected by his parents, an orphan. And he elevates him to be the heir. If I decode the story, it's basically saying a king who rejected his own biological children in favor of a son who was good enough to rule. And we are named after that man, Bharata, Bharata.
It is equal to meritocracy. Indra, king of gods and the lord of heaven, is in constant pursuit of success and wealth. Lakshmi. But Lakshmi prefers the side of Vishnu. Are you Indra chasing success? Or are you Vishnu with success chasing you? Therein lie the answers to who is a leader and ideal leadership qualities.
Well, Indra really is not a leader, because you see, the definition of a leader here we are talking about is someone, what is Vishnu's role? He is taking care of the world, which means his reference point of action is the world, others, not him. It's not about self-actualization. He's not trying to actualize himself. He's taking care of others, and in just doing that, he becomes a fortune magnet.
Okay.
Indra, on the other hand, is taking care of nobody.
Except for himself.
Self-actualization.
All right. So Indra is self-focused and therefore insecure and therefore chases Lakshmi.
Right.
Vishnu is focused on the other, therefore more secure, and therefore Lakshmi chases him.
No, he's not secure because he looks at the other. He is secure and therefore looks at the other.
All right. And yet when we talk about the creation of the world, we talk about three gods.
Yes.
At least this is popular perception. I may be
Yes,
wrong.
yes.
Brahma, the creator.
Yes.
Vishnu, the god that maintains. And Shiva, the destroyer. Why is Vishnu the most important of these three gods and the most revered as well?
When you're talking about creation, even the word creation, when you use the word creation, there is implicitly we are visualizing the God as it is told in the Bible, creates the world. But in the Indian context, the one who's creating the world is not worshipped. The one who's destroying the world is being worshipped. Now, either we are mad, or there's a problem with our understanding of the words. Creating what? Destroying what? Preserving what is the question to be asked. You see, Brahma's action, when you read the scriptures, is a God who is yearning constantly. He's chasing things because he's seeking to understand who he is. And therefore he creates the world to answer this question of who he is. And when he creates the world, rather than figuring out the answer, he starts chasing it and wants to possess it and want to control it, and he wants to dominate it. And he's lost his identity, he's lost his original purpose, and he's forgotten. and therefore should not be worshipped, because he's yearning, he's chasing the wrong thing. One could say that this Brahma is Aham Brahmasmi, you and I, human beings, we're chasing something and we're losing sight of what we really want, and we have to introspect to figure what it is. On the other hand, the gods who are worshipped are Vishnu and Shiva. Neither of these gods chase the goddess, but the goddess comes to them. Now, the difference between these two gods is, Shiva says, the world doesn't matter. This is all Maya, this is delusion. I shut my eyes to the world and I switch off.
So he gives up.
He lets go. While Vishnu says, well, the world doesn't matter, so let's enjoy it. So it's a question of perspective. Three different characters in mythology who are engaging with three currencies in a very different way. One says, I yearns for Lakshmi, Saraswati and Durga. Yearns, searching for it. That's Brahma. That's you and I. That's an average human being. On the other extreme is Shiva, who just switches off and says,
I don't want any of this.
I don't want any of this. So he's the Vairagi, the hermit.
Right, the ascetic.
Ascetic. And what is he surrounded by? Cold, icy mountains.
Right.
Destruction. He's switched off. And the goddess goes to him and says, you know what, you may have figured it out, but the rest of the world hasn't, so please open the eyes. And so she marries him. So she goes to him and appeals to him and says, you know what, engage with the world, engage with the world. So you have two forms of Shiva, that is Shiva, whose eyes are shut, and Shankara,
whose eyes are open.
Whose eyes are open. He is the benevolent one, the boon-giving one.
So there is still attachment in him.
Engagement in him.
Engagement in him.
The words are important because they have different meanings. Now, Vishnu
is the preserver.
Is the preserver. His eyes are always open. So when you go to Vishnu temple, the eyes are always open. He's looking at you and he's amused by you. He's amused because, you see, we are all Brahmas, and he's saying, you know what, your direction is wrong. And he's smiling and he's helping. He is the caring God. He's helping you. Very similar to Shankara.
And so this is what we need to try and be.
This is what a leader should be, which means he has to be wise enough to care. So a leader is someone who enables you to grow materially, L, intellectually, S, and emotionally, D. That's the role of the leader. And in doing so, grows himself. So your growth becomes his growth.
But why is the creator, the man who has helped create all of this, not given equal...
See, what has he created? See, we have to go back to the scriptures. He has created desire. He has created ignorance. He has created the chase. He has created the rat race. Brahma has created a rat race. Would you worship the creator of the rat race? Or will you worship the person who tells you how to step out from the rat race and still have the goddess of wealth chasing you? You decide.
You believe that the various avatars of Vishnu actually represent leadership at different stages of a corporation's life, leadership in different phases of a corporation's life. Is that correct?
Before answering any question on avatars, we have to understand Vishnu. You see, when you look at Vishnu's image, you see, what is mythology? I mean, mythology is a communication of ideas through forms, of ideas that people respected. Now, Vishnu is managing the world, and he has got something called a conch shell,
Right.
which is Shank. Then he has got a wheel on the other side, which is called a Chakra. Then he has got a mace in one hand, a club, which is Gada, and he has a lotus flower called a Padma on the other. Look at it carefully. This is for communicating. Wheel for reviewing, Gada for discipline, and Padma for appreciation. And any good leader does the same thing. He has to communicate, he has to review, he has to discipline you if you're not online, and he has to appreciate if you've done good things.
So it is this image that in many ways represents the ideal traits of leadership.
Ideal traits of leadership. You see, you don't see a rule book anywhere, do you?
No, but if he needed to discipline, he would need to discipline according to a set of rules, right?
Yes, but every rule exists in a context. So there cannot be fixed rules. There has to be a fixed principle. And that context is explained using the concept of yuga in mythology.
Okay.
So they say that when the life cycle of the world has 4 parts, it is going to die, just as human beings will die one day. We have youth, then we have maturity, old age, senility.
And in many ways, this represents the many phases that a corporation goes through as well.
So all the yogas will have different set of rules based on a common principle called dharma. Dharma is a principle,
not religion,
not a code of conduct, and certainly not religion.
Right.
So we have to understand the principle of dharma, and then we have to understand the concept of yoga, and then you'll understand the role of the avatars. In each of these yogas there is a separate avatar, each one upholding dharma but following very different rules.
Okay.
And that's why, for example, you have Ram, who is ekam patni vrata, faithful to one wife, and you have Krishna, who is a lover of beautiful many women. How do you reconcile the two?
And both are gods.
And both are gods, and both are upholding dharma, but the rules are very different. So you have Krishna, who is Radha and Rukmini and Satyabhama and Jambavati. Ram, only Sita. And Parshuram, there is no wife around. Where is the wife? There is no wife around. So three gods, three different rules.
So one overarching principle, different kinds of leadership required in different phases of the life cycle of an organization. But all feeding in or all abiding by that one overarching principle. All right. Why then, if all these four are equal, they just represent different phases and different styles of leadership, is one greater than the rest? For instance, every time we talk of a perfect society, we call it Ram Rajya. It is supposed to be heaven on earth,
yes,
right? In many ways.
Yes.
There are many other leaders, there are many other gods. Why is Ram revered so much more than the rest of them?
Remember, that's the only form of God which is visualized as a king. Krishna is not king, he's a king maker. You worship Krishna as a cowherd and a charioteer, not as a king. Ram is the only deity of all the deities in India. There's so many temples in India. There's only one deity who's visualized as a king. That's Ram. So there's only one king we're talking about who's worshipped.
But it can't be his position that draws the faithful, right? The fact that he's king is not instrumental in why he's so revered.
The divinity is indifferent to his role because he's Vishnu. So he's cowherd, he's charioteer. Remember, these are...
So why are you laying so much emphasis on the kingliness of him?
Because he is doing what a king is supposed to do. He's living the life of... He's behaving as a king is supposed to be. And that's what Ram is associated with. And what is that it's supposed to be? He is living for the people, to the point that when given a choice between an honest and faithful wife and a cruel subjects, cruel, unjust, unfair subjects, what does the king take a decision? He chooses his cruel subjects and rejects his faithful wife. It's the classic conflict between personal life and professional life. And he chooses the professional life over the personal life. He sacrifices it.
But the professional life for the good of the people, not the professional life for his own personal advancement in the professional life.
Absolutely. If you look at our legends, not mythology, but legends, people who have sacrificed their children are put on a higher pedestal because we know how impossible that is. It's impossible.
So
you cannot
Ram
do that.
Rajya is almost the attainment of the impossible.
It is the attainment of the impossible because it is about sacrificing what you love most dearest and love for others.
Why is success so individualistic? When we talk about, in the context of business, of course, successful companies, we almost always connect them to one overwhelmingly successful individual. Almost everything about the success of leadership connects to that leader. We rarely praise the board of Apple, but Steve Jobs is God.
Yes.
Similarly for Microsoft, but Bill Gates is God. Similarly for Reliance Industries, Dhirubhai Ambani, though, is a legend for what he has achieved. Why is success so individualistic when everything in mythology seems to be talking about the community, the other, the outside?
Okay. Everything in Indian mythology talks about the other and the outside. The Western mythology is a complex combination between Greek ideas and biblical ideas.
Right.
Now, in the biblical idea, there is God and there is prophet. And the prophet brings the rules of God to man, and we have to align to the rules. And the prophet is subject to these rules. He's not independent of the rules. He's not creator of these rules. He's subject to these rules. The Greek model is very different. The Greek model, the hero is someone who challenges the gods, who fights the gods, and who triumphs despite the gods.
Okay.
Now, when we use the word leader today in common parlance, these words have come from the Western context.
Right.
And when they are using the word leader, they're referring to the heroes of Greek mythology who challenge the gods, that is the status quo, who challenge the establishment and innovate and create something new,
right.
breakthrough. They're the Hercules of modern times. And Hercules is always alone. Have you seen Hercules with family?
No.
Or Theseus or Jason? None of them are with family. They're these individuals, and you never, some of them are kings, but you never hear about their kingdom. You hear about their great adventures. And all our leadership books that we have are basically Greek heroes.
When we're that individualistically oriented, and if the board is not as responsible or as revered, the board is always going to come second to the individual leader.
Yes.
If the board always comes second to the individual leader, let me go back to the conversation we had in the very first episode. How is the board ever going to be able to stand up to that leader?
This is the great Western conflict, the individual versus the community. The individual versus the community.
In the Indian context, how do you apply
It's
the
not achievement which makes
leadership?
Ram worthy of worship. It is sacrifice that makes him worthy of worship. So I would actually argue a leader has to begin as Parshuram, then become Ram, evolve into Krishna. And if
finally?
unfortunate, may have to become Buddha or Kalki, depending on the situation. These are the avatars. So Parshuram is rule follower, very early. He's like this very strict teacher who punishes you if you break the rules. So it's very early phase in the organization, Krita Yoga, the early days. Then he becomes the model leader who hopes by being a model of sacrifice that people will understand the meaning of sacrifice. Because the whole kingdom is watching this great king serving them, having sacrificed his own personal happiness.
So he leads by example.
He leads by example. And eventually becomes Krishna, who is the ultimate coach.
Okay.
He's coaching and creating new talent and hoping that the Pandavas will become like Ram. They don't. They gamble away their own kingdom, thinking that kingdom is property. So he has to put them through a great period of vanavas and sort of repair the damage and get them back. And there's a lot of bloodshed which happens.
Right.
So he's coaching them. And finally he becomes Buddha, where he switches off,
Detaches.
withdraws. Or Kalki, who just breaks the system completely because it's not worth upholding anymore.
So either you withdraw if it's worth sustaining,
Because the kings are there to take care of it, then it's the ashrama. You have become the great ascetic.
or you destroy it because it's not worth maintaining
It's not
anymore.
worth maintaining anymore. And that becomes the Kalki. So it's a very beautiful narrative which is in a way saying evolution of leadership. It's not becoming one style, it's context. Early phases, Parshuram. Perfect phase, Ram. Then become Krishna, create talent, and then move out. Go away. The world will continue without you. It has been continuing for
And if it
millions of
doesn't
years.
deserve to continue, it will self-implode.
It will self-implode. So chhod do.
Detach.